Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Healing Outside the Box. My name is Jean Tiberio, and I'm a nutritionist and a wellness coach. Today we have episode 170 coming to you, and I'm calling it Nutrition in the News. Now, I was going to do an entire episode on a meat diet versus a plant diet for treating diabetes, but I'm going to shelf that and just give you the summary of 3 interesting, or what I think is interesting, stories that I came across in the news. The one I just mentioned was a study comparing the American Diabetes Association diet, which is essentially a meat diet, or what they call a 30-40-30 diet, and that's 30% calories from protein, 30% calories from fat, and 40% calories from carbohydrate. They compared that to a plant-based diet. They looked at preventing and controlling diabetes. The other 2 stories that popped up recently, I think, are worth mentioning as well. The second story is about a nutrition supplement that is now being promoted by Dr. Oz and therefore getting a lot of attention. The third story is about the future of growing plants, and it was told by 60 Minutes. And we'll get to all of that. But first, how about those Red Sox? If you're not a Boston Red Sox fan, you should probably feel relieved because we are tortured souls for the most part, and I imagine we've been called other things. But this year, for some unimaginable reason, we have started off the season with a 16-2 record. Now, if you're not into baseball, let me just tell you that a 16-2 record is quite unusual for baseball. But then we lost 2 games in a row. I could just feel the dread creeping up the back of my neck. Oh, here we go again. So they better win tonight, or I'll be sleeping with one eye open. And, oh yes, there's another thing I wanted to mention, and this is about Patriots Day. Patriots Day is a big thing in the Boston area, and it's in fact a state holiday. The room I'm sitting in right now looks out on the Salem Common, where the first soldiers formed, I guess, the first line that became the National Guard. That was back in 1636, when I believe Salem was still the capital of Massachusetts. Eventually, that group of guys became the Patriot Militia. Perhaps you can see where I'm going with this. On Patriots Day every year, the current National Guard, dressed up in their fine Revolutionary War costumes, with their muskets, march around and do what guys do with their reenactments. There was also a military band to march to, which I guess is all part of the fun. They had musket-carrying men on horses with their fancy tassels. The horses had the tassels, not the men. And of course there was a line of cannons. At least this year they smartened up and didn't face the cannons toward the children's playground. So anyway, I said to my home health aide, "Oh, here we go again. They're going to shoot off the cannons and spook the poor horses." She didn't seem all that interested, but my cat Betty and I were very interested. So we opened the window and decided to watch either the festivities or the horror show. It actually could have gone either way. And so they had a lovely military marching band and lots of soldiers walking around with flags and so forth. They also had a recruiting table, but I don't know if they were having good luck with that because there were only a few families with small children, as it was so cold. And then the cannons went off. The second that the first cannon blasted, which shook my building, by the way, my cat took off like a bullet, or a cannonball. The horses all stood up on their hind legs, and 2 of the soldiers were thrown from their horses. One of them was thrown to the side, but the other soldier, the one in the front that I was watching, fell underneath the horse and may have gotten caught somehow in the reins or the stirrups. But the horse was so frightened, trying to get away and all, that the horse trampled the soldier. It was so unsettling for me to see this play out in real time. I almost felt a little guilty for continuing to watch, but there was not too much I could do, being inside and all. The horses took off to the other side of the common, while the poor injured soldier just lay there on the ground, not moving. I guess one of them called 911, because the ambulance and the EMTs arrived fairly shortly. But this was the most bizarre part. The fake Patriot soldiers, in their costumes, never stopped to help the poor guy. A line of 4 soldiers with their flags actually walked right by him, and of course the music kept playing. It was like I was watching a military satire, and I don't even know if there is such a thing. Anyway, the EMTs boarded the poor guy onto a board and into the ambulance. As they were loading him in, I was thinking, this is just another senseless military something. And I was a pacifist before I saw all that. Anyway, let's get back to today's episode, Nutrition in the News. The first item is about a comparison of a 30% protein, 30% fat diet versus a plant-based diet to prevent or control diabetes. So the question here is this: is a low-carb diet good for diabetes or not? Here's what it comes down to. It all depends on what type of carbs we're eating. Now, both high-protein and plant-based diets may lower weight, and we know that lowering our weight will help bring blood sugars back into the normal range. But it's more complicated than just blood sugar numbers. Dr. Michael Greger discussed this issue in a recent video. He pulled up journal articles that state that the plant-based diets boost antioxidants. This helps kill free radicals, and that by itself will reduce insulin resistance. So it will both prevent and control diabetes. Here's another factor. Fat produces a low-grade inflammation, and this can help trigger insulin resistance. Here's another factor. Fiber from plants levels out blood sugar spikes. Fiber or plant diets in general also help to rid our bodies of excess estrogen, and estrogen in excess is associated with an increased diabetes risk. Plants may also hasten the removal of fat from our liver. But then we get to the whole chicken and egg argument. If we were eating steak and fries, and then we start eating a plant-based diet with lots of vegetables, are we getting rid of the bad stuff or increasing the good stuff? Well, there was another study that suggests that based on the diet history data that they compiled, the more frequent the meat consumption, the higher the rate of diabetes, even if controlled for by weight. They also theorized that intestinal bacteria in people who eat a lot of meat may work against them. And of course we know from our probiotic commercials on TV, a high-fiber diet with fermented foods creates our lovely probiotic intestinal bacteria. In another study, they simply put one group of people on a plant-based diet and another group of people on the conventional diabetes diet, and hands down, the plant-based diet helped control sugars the best. In other words, it treats the diabetes better once you have diabetes. Okay, so here's my second item on nutrition in the news. The turmeric and forskolin controversy. This supplement is a combination of those two substances. Turmeric we know as the spice du jour, and there is good evidence that it can be used to help people control their risk of getting cancer. And the second substance is forskolin. Now this is a root from a plant in the mint family. So these two substances together are promoted as a supplement that can help you shrink your belly fat. I went looking for journal articles studying the beneficial effects of this combination of substances. I found none. That was hint number one, that this may be a hoax. Hint number two is that Dr. Oz is pushing it. Ditto for Shark Tank. Hint number three, and this is a quote from their website, quote, "It substantially boosts energy levels," end quote. Hint number four, also on the website, there's a circle on the website with the words side effects inside the circle. Then there's a line slashing through those words. I think enough said about that. Now this forskolin is listed as an alternative medicine that is part of Ayurveda traditions. In countries like India, Ayurveda therapies and practices have been integrated with general wellness practices and, in some cases, mainstream medicine. I'll give you a link to an NIH study that was published in JAMA regarding this substance. By the way, JAMA is the Journal of the American Medical Association. For right now, I'll just give you a general summary if you're not into reading the entire article. The bottom line is that the scientists are cautioning people about buying these Ayurvedic medicines over the internet when they don't give you a clear picture of the source of these medicines. These scientists searched the internet using 5 different search engines and looked up Ayurvedic medicine. 230 Ayurvedic medicines were randomly selected for purchase. Then they examined the concentrations of heavy metals in all of these medicines. They tested for lead, mercury, and arsenic, and they found that 21% of the samples they bought from the internet contained higher than allowable levels of at least one of these heavy metals. As I'm sure you know, all of these heavy metals are associated with some type of brain damage. So in my opinion, they should probably shut down the sale of this supplement until they can clean it up. Now that we know where I stand about forskolin, I want to talk about turmeric or curcumin. Turmeric is a hot new spice that is all the rage, and there is a decent amount of evidence that it may have a role as an anti-carcinogenic substance. In other words, it has been shown to slow down or even stop the growth of tumor cells. That is, in fact, a very big deal. In terms of burning your belly fat, I'm afraid that there is no evidence to suggest that at this point. I still recommend adding turmeric if you love the flavor and aroma and you want to use it for general preventative health and not necessarily weight loss. I would just suggest that you buy the spice for about $3 or $4 instead of that $50 bottle of those pills that are being sold on the internet. Here's my third story in the news. The 60-minute story on planting organic produce indoors. The story's called The MIT Future Factory, and it was aired on April 22nd, 2018. It was kind of cool seeing a few buildings I recognize because I actually worked there as a lab tech many, many years ago. In this future factory, 232 graduate students are asked to conceive the unimaginable. They used to call it blue sky research in the old days, but now I think they just call it research. Back in 1979, these guys invented Google Maps and flat screens. In the 90s, they came up with Siri and Alexa prototypes. Now they're doing teaching robots and, believe it or not, a way to record your own dreams. Also, they mentioned, with electronics, they're beginning to redefine what is a disability. For instance, we will someday be able to move our prosthetic foot with our thoughts. Although that was exciting, given the fact that I've been in a wheelchair for 28 years and it's getting old. This next story made me stop my plans for a podcast episode and tell you about it. Caleb Parker built an indoor farm that is not like any greenhouse. He is not only controlling the climate, he's making a recipe for the perfect head of lettuce and everything else he grows. In other words, it's controlled for X amount of oxygen, X amount of CO2, humidity, temperature. Let's say, for example, San Marzano tomatoes from Italy make the best sauce. This region in Italy is blessed to have long growing seasons in a particularly warm fall. We will soon be able to use those same genetics, the same climate conditions, and amount of moisture to make the perfect sauce anywhere. And he's inside of a big truck, essentially. This guy was growing basil in air, with suspended particles of nutrients and, of course, moisture. He's also growing cotton 12 months per year, at 4 times the yield, and in a lot less time. The potential for essentially unlimited organic produce at reduced cost is right on the horizon. We may be able to kiss Monsanto and their toxic herbicides and GMO seeds goodbye forever. And if that's not exciting enough by itself, my gut tells me that we will see significant drops in Alzheimer's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, allergies, and maybe even autism. And if that isn't a mic drop, I don't know what is. I'll put a link to the 60-minute story in the show notes, but you can also just find it on cbsnews.com. I recommend you watch the entire episode if you have the time. So if you need something uplifting to come through your television right now, this might just be it. That's all I have for you today. Be well and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.